I did not have a concept of self and identity outside of Mormonism. Like, that was the only thing that really mattered.
Even the way I would speak or present myself or hold my body, I definitely tried to become like more feminine. Became sexist towards myself and generally.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, and this is Oscar, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions and organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you are listening only and you would prefer to see my face and Oscar's face here, head on over to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. It would mean the world if you could like and subscribe and leave a comment. I'm here with two amazing ex-Mormon content creators. They have a very successful YouTube channel. If you are ex-Mormon or in the Mormon space, I'm sure you know who they are. We did a video previously about missions, conversion, and how high-demand religions use different tactics to convert people into their church and how it's effective or if it's not very effective. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how high-demand religions kind of dissolve your identity, make you fit into a box, and what that's like when you finally break out of that box. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me, Zelp on the Shelf, Sam and Tanner.
Hey,
Hi.
it's so good to be here.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about identity within the church because I'm curious to see, Sam, how you shaped and molded into a Mormon girl versus who you were before, and how you were able to bloom after you realized that it wasn't true.
Yeah, I do think kind of sad, but my identity before Mormonism was very wrapped up in being smart, being like the top of my class. And I had just read a lot as a kid as a coping mechanism, and just being an only child, there wasn't really anything else to do. So I did always kind of naturally do well in school, and that took that on as like, this is my thing. I'm not pretty and I'm not lovable, but I am smart and I can get the best grades or whatever. So I really prioritized intelligence. And then once I became Mormon, and then especially when I went to BYU, Idaho, sort of just shed that, because I don't think it's encouraged for women to be intellectual. And so it wasn't like I didn't care about, I got good grades at school and stuff, but Mormonism became the focus, and also being desirable to men, like finding love in a romantic partnership, Mormon marriage, I guess, became the new thing. So there's definitely a shift. And it's very disturbing for me to look back on and see ways that I adopted sexism that I hadn't even been raised with. Because typically you don't really see that, where you grow up in a less sexist environment and then become more. It's usually the other way around, but it was, you hear these things about gender and women, and I really took Mormonism to heart. And if a bishop stood up and said something, for the most part, I'd probably believe it, so there were ways, even the way I would maybe speak or present myself or hold my body, I definitely tried to become more feminine, because I think I felt that these Mormon girls were all very feminine, and I've always I don't know, I suppose I've never really thought about that too much. And growing up in England, it wasn't, you could really be anything within your gender, and it wasn't, you could still get teased, but I don't know, it just was definitely more gender fluid growing up in England. You didn't have to be in these rigid boxes of what a boy was and what a girl was. So that was interesting, adopting, just taking on sexism willingly. I suppose not willingly, because it's you being led down a path, but yeah, became sexist towards myself and generally.
That's so interesting. I have noticed when people convert, or they weren't really into Mormonism, then all of a sudden they become super Mormon, there is this level of judgment that comes with that, where all of a sudden they put on this "I'm a little bit better than you" vibe. And maybe they don't mean to. It's just, I have the truth and you don't, and I know better and you don't, and you need to follow this way because it's what God wants, and you don't really know because you're led by Satan. Did you feel any of that kind of happening?
Yeah. Mormonism is fundamentally a religion with a superiority complex, right? It's the one true church. Everyone else is a portion of the truth. We have the whole truth. You got to be in it to be saved. It's really hard to escape grandiosity when that's the ideology you subscribe to. So I don't know. I don't know how judgy I was in the couple of years I was in England as a Mormon. I mean, probably started to be judgmental of things. Also, it kind of paired well with like various judgments I'd already had. Like growing up, my parents' relationship with alcohol was like a source of a lot of distress for me. So that was something I already kind of was primed to judge people for in a way. Not too much. I mean, not to the level that maybe someone born in Mormonism might judge alcohol, but yeah, I don't know. Definitely at BYU Idaho, I was very judgy and very like would leave my roommate a note if she was late for curfew, telling her that God would bless her if she kept curfew.
No, you
That's
did
who
not.
I became. So that was really cool and fun.
Oh my gosh.
I think that it highlights the when, you know, earlier when we were talking about the cultural problems when Mormons get together en masse. My mission president used to say to me, he didn't want me to go to church school. He'd say, Mormons are like manure. They have to be spread out to do good. Otherwise, they just stink.
Oh
and
my God.
when you have this, like, when you have this grandiosity and religious exceptionalism that makes you just assume that you're doing the right things and you're more righteous than other people, when you're, you know, like you or I who grew up where Mormons were the minority, you may be hesitant to outright say those things to people in the world
Yeah.
because then they'll think you're crazy.
Yeah.
Now, when you're all Mormons living together, then you're allowed to just judge wantonly because they know better. They know they should be living up to this standard.
We're at BYU Idaho, so we're all part of the same thing. So I can absolutely leave you a note because that is what you should be doing, and you should know that.
Right.
You know? I would never leave a note to my friend in England who's not Mormon, being like, "You need to stop sleeping with your boyfriend." That'd be unhinged. I wouldn't have any friends. So that's the thing. Again, if you're living in these areas that aren't Mormon, you know that you will not be able to maintain relationships with people if you lean into those impulses. So judgment, yep, big theme of Mormonism. I did a whole video essay on our channel about that, about how Mormons have a superiority complex. If anyone's interested in that topic.
Yeah, we'll link it right here.
And the responses are all like, we don't have a complex, we just are superior.
It's just that we're right and we don't know how to make you see that.
Are you serious? Do people really comment that?
Oh, I mean, in essence, yes. That's the majority of our
A lot
critical.
of sorry that people offended you, but
You obviously didn't study it enough. You obviously didn't
Yeah.
I'm like,
really.
bitch, you don't know how much we studied it, okay?
Oh
You would
my
have
gosh.
hated us. If we were all still Mormon, you'd hate us for being too good at being Mormon.
What were some other cringy things that either of you did as far as
Shalice.
like tell me all the things.
Oh, where to fucking begin?
I know one of yours.
What is it? What is it?
Didn't you write like for your college application letter or something? You wrote like about your conversion experience or something. Not to.
Oh
BYU,
my god,
to-
no. Well, for BYU Idaho, obviously, but no. You know, you just have these stories that make your skin crawl. When I got a job at this bookshop when I was still Mormon in high school, and I remember in the interview, he like asked what my proudest moment was or something, and I was talking about my conversion to Mormonism. But I think I just got lucky because he was like a really nice guy and kind of was like interested in it. Because it's, again, religion is just such a novelty in England.
Yeah.
So I did get the job, but just was going on in this job interview. My most cringy things are like the ways I did try to convert. Like I remember I had this job as sort of like a waitress, occasional bartender when I was home for the summer in England at BYU Idaho. And there was just this bartender that was always really nice to me, and she gave me her email at the end of the summer. And I think I just used the email to like send her a message trying to convert her. I remember me and my friend Shaylee from BYU Idaho were once on a plane. She was staying with me in England, and we went to Italy, and we were coming back from Italy to England. And we were hysterically laughing that whole flight because, I don't know, young and hyper. And this woman was like, oh, you girls have such lovely energy. And at the end of the flight, she gave us like a business card. And then we sent her an email trying to convert her. Any attempt trying to convert a normal person is my biggest cringe. What about you?
Same. I think, especially early on, like as a child, was very
You used
encouraged.
to sing hymns going down the corridor at school thinking people might feel the spirit.
Just dropping little seeds
Little
of faith
Tanner.
everywhere I go.
Who looked 12 until he was 22. Just coming down the hallways.
Yeah, definitely felt pressure as a young person to like be actively trying to convert teachers, friends, neighbors, all that. And I invited like my teachers to my baptism and stuff.
Oh.
And the older I got, the less I was trying to do, just because I felt so uncomfortable every time, and I felt guilty. And even on the mission, I felt like I didn't want to do this. I don't want to stop this person who I know doesn't want to talk to me and try to get them to do this thing that they don't want to do, but I have to. And
overriding your natural impulses, that's how they get you.
Yep.
The more you do it, the less of a question there is.
Yep. And so pretty much any time of just like having a normal interaction with someone where they're like, oh, this nice person who is taking interest in me as a person, how nice. And then me switching it into, the reason you felt so good during this conversation.
Yes.
It's because I happen to
emotions.
be a part of the true church. And it is like one of the things in deconstruction, looking back and seeing how cringy and problematic Mormon culture can be, is realizing that like we had no way of having just normal relationships with people outside the church. It was always filtered through the lens of proselytization. And that is so culty. Like, you should be able to have friends who don't share your beliefs, but that's just not prioritized, because it's either you're converting them so that they can be friends with you in the church, or they're not living the standards. They have a whole different thing. We need to focus our attention on someone who will be more receptive. And it just makes me sad that so many just natural relationships weren't allowed to blossom because they weren't interested in becoming members of the church.
Yeah, it creates a lot of inauthenticity.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, once I'm at BYU, Idaho, like, it does, you're just surrounded by Mormons. So there's not so much that pressure, which I think was good, and then allows that judgmental faculty to be pointed toward people of your same faith, which in a way was kind of good. It was good for me to be surrounded by Mormons for the first time ever and realize, like, oh, not everybody takes this as seriously, and in a lot of ways is very problematic. And to see those the little problems magnified just by sheer number of people there participating and all that. So it was good perspective in that way.
Yeah. Did you guys ever hand out the I Am Mormon business cards?
Didn't hand up the business card, but I did do a profile.
Oh, I just had another cringe.
And I don't know if it's ever been taken down, so I am still a Mormon, though Mormons aren't even Mormons anymore, so.
Right.
I just remember when I lived in Logan and I was temple married, there was this family, I think they were from Mexico, at the side of the road somewhere asking for food or, asking for donations. And so me and my ex-husband went to Walmart and bought them a bunch of food, and then also put a copy of the Book of Mormon in there with like a little calling card and some kind of little note with our testimony. Couldn't just do the nice thing. Had to do it with the spiritual brownie points of Mormonism.
You gotta.
Oh, but I mean,
patronizing.
kudos for
At least you
also
get-
giving food. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could have been like those asshole evangelicals
And
who just like on the tip at the restaurant are like, John 3:17, that's the only tip you need. Or,
Yeah, and I like to imagine that family is just like, lol, we got a bunch of free food out of these idiots. So hopefully it was fine. But cringe.
Yeah, there is a lot of dissolution of identity within high demand religions. And that's something that I wanted to talk about, is how they mold you into fitting this perfect Mormon box and get you to do things that you don't want to do, get you to be servants of the Lord, and how it benefits them to take away the fringes of your personality. So any thoughts on that?
I'd say for me, it wasn't even like taking away, just from birth being molded into that. I've said this before, that I did not have a concept of self and identity outside of Mormonism. Like, that was the only thing that really mattered.
Wow.
And now there's so many aspects of myself that I really enjoy and delight in: my hobbies, my interests, my talents, my personality. But really, I didn't care. I didn't care that I made art. I didn't care about music, really, only in as much as it could be used to further the kingdom of God. I've always enjoyed laughter and humor, but for many years felt very guilty about that, because in the temple you promised to avoid all loud laughter.
Crazy.
And so anytime I made people laugh too much, I felt guilty about it.
Wow.
And just everything, the way that I dressed, the music I listened to, everything was filtered through that lens. And it wasn't like, oh, my Mormon self and then the stuff I do outside of Mormonism. It was all in that, which is why leaving was so hard, is because then suddenly you're left without any concept of self or identity. And that is just like a harrowing experience, but also really fruitful, moving past it and, falling in love with those aspects of myself and fully embracing them now has been, the flip side of joy. So at least that, but yeah, they definitely know how to mold you from a very young age. And if you're a convert, they do their work really quickly. Mm-hmm. Conformity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, as I said before, I mean, like, I suppose intellectually Mormonism, like, there was a lot of ways I regressed, and I mean, even things like I've been a big reader my whole life. And for the 5-6 years I was in Mormonism, I just don't think I read anything that wasn't a Mormon book. I'm sure I did at some point, like a few things, right. But that whole side of me was just kind of gone. And like, I was at 18 when I left high school, was like quite a strong writer. I mean, it's all relative, right? Like, wasn't actually that good, but really loved writing and had some success with it. But that just became something I didn't really pursue while Mormon, except to write like Mormon shit. Like they do co-opt all your talents, and then it has like a stagnating effect a lot of the time, because you really don't have to be that good of a writer to, like start a Mormon blog and peddle these bigoted ideas about why people should be, being more obedient. And so I suppose it was more, like a lot of stagnation. I don't know. There were ways I was able to maintain my personality too, though, almost like because I didn't grow up in Mormonism and I was able to sort of like forge my own path, and I didn't have anyone, I wasn't accountable to anyone but myself, really. And I suppose you have bishops and stuff, but I was never like looking to be, too far outside the margins of obedience. So, I do think, like, because BYU Idaho was quite a like creative environment in a weird way, like not
university, there's lots of things happening.
There was a way that Mormonism kind of did, and also being sober at university, I think, encourages like a kind of creativity. And the people I hung out with did tend to be people that were more creative and down to clown. So I don't know, it's a mixed bag, Mm-hmm. But as the things I've already talked about with like feeling like I have to be more feminine, and I mean certainly dress a certain way,
but not feminist.
Not feminist, no.
Not too feminist.
And just completely sort of letting my brain just like stay where it is, like not really feeling the need to get smarter in any way except Mormonism.
Yeah.
But then saying that, I don't know, I suppose if we did an advertising degree and learned stuff.
Yeah, that's actually where I was gonna go next. So I'm glad that you said that. I wondered if going from non-Mormon to Mormon, if you felt the pressure of becoming just a Mormon housewife, if your ambitions kind of stopped and took a turn in that direction, because there's so much pressure, especially on college women. Yeah. It's like, wait, you're not married yet? You're still, you're in college, you're not married?
While Mormon, I just kind of subscribed to this idea that like, yes, I would have kids and a husband and be at home, but I would have a job from home. I think as well, because we're doing communication, and obviously a lot of comms jobs can be sort of more virtual and you can sort of do your own thing. I guess I just always imagined I'd be writing or doing something from home. So I didn't imagine a reality for myself where I would just like stop having a career because I had children. But I think I had, not that people don't do this because they do, but I had this fantasy in my head where it would just could kind of be both. But I also was never, I thought that you should have kids as a Mormon, but I also wasn't, when I got married in the temple, I wasn't thinking, I need to do that anytime soon. I was still very much had like the England mindset of like, do not rush into having kids. Like, don't, as much as we would hear a lot of messages at BYU Idaho about like, have kids as soon as you can. And
even if you can't afford them or take care of them.
Yeah, we had a lot of that messaging, but somehow I was able to sort of just like hold that cognitive dissonance, because it just felt like a self-evident, more true truth, like to not rush into having kids, to not have kids if you can't afford them. And I suppose I thought maybe that's fine for other people. I just knew myself well enough, and also have never been, I just was so not raised with like the housewife thing, that that wasn't really able to take too deep a root in my brain.
That's good. When I didn't realize that you were married. You got married in the temple?
Yes, I did. It was actually, I got married in the temple like a month before my faith completely collapsed.
Really?
So Tana was there in the temple with me. We were both going through our faith crisis, but like still like ultimately thought it was probably true. Still were obedient. And then a month later, all came crashing down.
Oh no. What was that like? So how old were you at that point?
22.
So you're 22, you just got married, and everything is collapsing. I'm sure you've talked about this before, but I'm just fascinated how that was only a month after being married in the temple. What did your husband think?
Yeah. Well, it was all very traumatic, and thankfully I'm very persuasive. Like, I'm a good person to argue with. So my husband wasn't able to. I think it took me about a week. I mean, it was kind of this sort of like tandem faith crisis where Tana had a faith crisis, and then I was talking to him about that, and then that plunged me into one, and then also my ex-husband and I were talking about things. So it was kind of we were all kind of staggered in where we were at with our faith crises. But then I think when Tana left, I think there was only like a week or two where I was like, shit, Tana hasn't been able to make this work, and he's like the smartest, most faithful person I know. So like, I'm in real trouble. But I was like, I just got married. I'm just going to try this. And then I just had this creeping feeling inside, like none of this is true, and you know it. But I didn't really know how to deal with that. And then eventually it just became impossible to ignore. I think my ex-husband just cried a lot for several days. We went and bought him an Xbox to try.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
We drove like 2 hours to buy him the new Xbox. Don't know why we thought that would help.
Like, sorry about your demolished faith.
Sorry,
Enjoy
your
this.
entire world just came crashing down. New Xbox
no.
though. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I'm pretty persuasive, and by that point we'd learned a lot. So, and also my ex-husband had been. I mean, he wasn't an idiot. He could see the writing on the wall too. So, I mean, I look back and it felt so lonely at the time, because even though I had Tana, and everyone's always like, oh, you guys are so lucky that you had each other when going through your faith crisis, it still is such a lonely journey, especially when you're still in the phase where you both still want to make it work. And we each had our different ways that we were trying to still maintain faith. And Tana got deeper into the Denver Snuffer movement than I did. And then again, I feel like it was only like a couple of weeks where you were like, no, I'm an atheist. And I was like trying to convince myself I wasn't.
I remember that over the worst pizza I've ever had.
The worst pizza we've ever had. Yeah, I remember that vividly. In Logan. Can't remember the name, but don't go there. But it's like, I didn't want to, even in just those couple of weeks, for example, I didn't really want to fully let Tana know. It takes time to admit things to yourself, so but in hindsight, I'm like, I was so lucky to have had Tana, and then also my ex-husband. I mean, the three of us did really navigate it together, and we were able to find community. I mean, we were in Logan, so we could go to John DeLynne's support group he was doing at the time. Yeah. So again, in hindsight, I've had a lot of support throughout all of it. And so it's sad to imagine people that don't have that, because it was so horrifying and hard even with that. So I can't even imagine like having nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much guilt, and you don't want to like affect anybody else's faith because you're still holding out for it to be true, and you don't want to mess anybody up or give them too much information.
There's like a phase where you don't even believe, you don't believe, you're trying so hard to, but you don't, and you'll still defend it as if you do believe. That's an interesting phase.
And then what happened when your faith came crashing down, both of you, around the same time, and now you realize that you can create yourself, you can create your reality, you can create your beliefs, how you dress, the way that you present yourself to the world. How was that building up and uncovering who you have been this whole time?
Well, it all started with an attempted margarita purchase at a Chili's, which they denied me because I didn't have the right ID. But it also was slow because just the depression and the nihilism was so intense. So it wasn't, and me and Tana we had been the type of people that so wanted it to be true. I think there are people that leave and they're like, oh, I always had a sense that it wasn't true, and I've always wanted to do this, this, and this. And it can be just like so immediately freeing and like exciting. But I feel like we had such an intense depression period that, I didn't give a shit. I was trying coffee and, other stuff, but that stuff was like not exciting enough to combat the nihilism, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it really took time. And then it wasn't until psychedelics, I feel like, that the actual hope returned and the healing process really began. Until then, it was just kind of sitting in the grief for a good year, I would say, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's really common because when you realize something that you've held so deeply is a lie, something that is part of yourself, then you almost turn on yourself and say, oh, well, you're a lie too. You don't really know who you are and what is life and is there a God? Who is Jesus? And you have to rebuild everything. I think that's one of the hardest things for non-Mormons or people who haven't experienced high demand religion to understand is there's not just like you and then your faith and then maybe the community of church. It's like intermixed. It is like a Jenga puzzle, and if you pull on one, then everything just comes down. You have to rebuild everything from scratch, and it's so hard for people to wrap their brains around. And the whole, you left Mormonism, but you can't leave it alone. Well, no, because it was a huge destructive part of my life, unwinding all of these things that I thought were true. And I was the same way. I was very devout. I was all about it, reading my scriptures every night. If I didn't read my scriptures and I had a bad dream, it was, well, you didn't read your scriptures that night. So that's why God gave you a nightmare. Yeah. So it was so deep in my subconscious that I think I did the avoidant tactic where when I left when I was about 20, and I was in Vegas in the singles ward, which was actually really fun. But I left, it all came tumbling down, and then I actually went to England for a study abroad, and that was like the perfect thing that could have happened to me because I was just taken out of the environment, and I didn't have to worry about friends asking me, why are you not at church? And I could just be myself, enjoy the fashion. England has killer fashion, and it was fun. Yeah, I think it's really hard, and not everyone gets that type of transplant situation where you can really take yourself out of the environment and see things from a different perspective. So I feel really fortunate to have had that, but it is fun to eventually, after you've come around, to rebuild yourself and figure out what you like, what do you actually believe? Maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. So I'd love to hear your experience with psychedelics and how that helped you emerge into who you are today. And who you are today. Tell everyone who you are.
Ooh, yeah, this could be a 3-hour podcast on its own.
It really could.
Well, I guess psychedelics, because I really, I hung up the towel, or whatever the expression is, threw in the towel when I could no longer believe in God. And because that was just kind of the last thing. It was like, maybe the church, maybe there's some way. And then when finally it was like, there's this God that I've been praying to and trying to live up to and trying to get in contact with, just is not real. And then that was kind of like, okay, I can just be done with all of this. And in a way it was kind of like humiliating. like I felt feeling like the first night that I just stopped praying and was like, there's nothing going on here. And then feeling kind of like ashamed or something, like, just realizing you've been bamboozled for your whole life is huge. And then with psychedelics, I'm trying to remember the first experiences.
Wasn't your first experience that time we were in the woods? And I told you I didn't want to have any kind of deep thing. I just wanted it to be fun and silly. And you were like, no, I want it to be a deep experience.
Yeah, that might have been the first. Or it was doing mushrooms up at a cabin.
No,
that winter place.
That was after.
Yeah, because I was trying to have a serious experience that would kick my life back into gear, and Samantha didn't. That came a little later.
It's like, I'm not looking to do any delving into myself. Yeah. I'm just here for the fun. And then boom, my entire existence has become delving into myself.
And then, I'm trying to get into it, and next thing I know, I have this British person telling me, you can't just lay on the table blaring Bob Marley in the middle of a park. People are going to know you're on drugs.
That's true. This was Logan, Utah.
Oh, so great.
But yeah, once I started diving into that space a bit more, I had been so depressed of like, oh, there's no God, there's no meaning to life. And it really just took that and like somehow made it positive of like, whoa, there's no God and there's no meaning to life. And yet somehow like everything felt so connected. So rather than experiencing the universe as this cold, vast nothingness, it was like, oh, it's this like singular organism of which I'm a part and which everybody else is a part. And we're all part of this thing that's happening. And my fullest expression and experience in that is like just being who I am and following my joy and living life more creatively and more openly and lovingly and doing things that I actually want to do. So yeah, so it just gave me, it felt like it linked all the dots, and in a lot of ways was like the spiritual experience I had been looking for in the church. Just that sense of transcendence that was also just like immersion. It didn't take me out of the world and be like, oh, this world is so profane and illusory. It was like, whoa, this world is so special, and the experience of being alive is so unique, and consciousness, what? This is so crazy. I can't believe I get to experience that in the gazillion years that have taken since the Big Bang to the stars forming and planets orbiting around them, for life to spring up and slowly over a gazillion years evolve to the point where I can now like eat a sandwich. That's crazy. Like, I'm so grateful for this experience just to witness it. And so it definitely like turned the lights on for me as a person. That's kind of a phrase from the 60s of like LSD turning people on. And I really did feel like it turned me on as a person, that I wasn't really alive before, that I wasn't really conscious. I was kind of in an automaton, just doing the things that I had been programmed to do and not just living as a fully conscious and alive being. And
so like limited in the options you even see as being available to you, that you don't realize, like, I mean, things aren't limitless per se, but there just are so many avenues you can go down. But it does feel like before psychedelics, I was just like on autopilot, and you'd feel tension at points because it's like you only feel able to act in one way, but then the way that you act is not fulfilling, or it doesn't, like the Mormon fairy tale with like, marriage and babies and being a stay-at-home mom. I think so many women are sold a fairy tale about that and then find that it isn't everything they've been taught it was. But that doesn't mean they have any like idea of what else they, you're still in it, so there's sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. We've been talking for a while, but yeah, it's almost like free will even though I don't believe in free will, it's like it starts opening up when you can start seeing more possibilities for yourself, and even just being able to examine your conditioning, let alone like think about what's possible beyond it, is completely, I totally understand the metaphor of like feeling not alive before. It's like you're alive, but you are operating at a lower level of consciousness.
It just brings you back to like the BITE model, right? Behavioral control, information control, thought control, emotional control. And when you are in, I guess you could just call it a cult. When you're in a cult and all of those things are happening, you are, as you said, unable to see the other options around you because you are literally in a bubble. And I think it's so beautiful, Tanner. I watched your very first video, your poem that went viral, which I will link it here, to see how you have grown since then. And you were just like two totally separate people looking at the person in the poem who was like lovely and beautiful and so heartfelt and so great. And looking at who you are now, just this like wild, eccentric, into fashion, like music, and like it's so much more colorful and fun and beautiful. And so I just wanted to talk about how you both have just blossomed into who you are, and exploring sexuality and exploring different topics that were unavailable or completely off limits when you were Mormon, and just how you feel now.
Well, it definitely feels much more, I mean, I still experience depression, anxiety like I did in the church, but I feel like my tools with dealing with them are so much more fit for the job, because I don't have to fit everything into this bunk paradigm of like, oh, I have to analyze this nightmare because maybe it was Satan or maybe it was this, and all these like fake imaginary things that I'm using to scrutinize everything going on in my life. Whereas now I can just exist in a way that feels good and wholesome and balanced for me. And so, yeah, I still have those things, and that's just part of the human condition, is having ups and downs. And but overall, I feel so much better outside of the church. I felt like there was this big like rope that had just been tied into this really tight knot existing in my stomach that I didn't even know was there until I left the church and was like, I feel relaxed for the first time in my life. I didn't even realize I was just holding that tension in my body.
Wow.
And then, like you said, being able to just feel free to explore and express, and not having to, again, filter everything through what is this multi-billion-dollar real estate firm posing as a church have to say about what I'm painting or listening to. Everything just feels more real, like, rather than, you know, memorizing filtered facts about biblical history that somehow have pertinence today, and kind of having these like flimsy gray models of reality that I'm always trying to avoid poking too hard at. You know, now I can study philosophy and about what it means, like how we know what we know, and what the real questions that are being asked actually are, and how people are grappling with those things in meaningful ways, and not just a way of like enforcing this religious identity. And then with art, I'd say more than anything is like taken that spiritual place for me, where it's become about synthesizing the things that I'm learning and feeling and experiencing, and creating that into something beautiful. And it's both a way of like dealing with stress and angst that flows through me, and that can be channeled into a healthy thing, also with like exercise and other stuff. And then creating something beautiful and meaningful out of that, versus, I mean, when I was a Mormon, practically all I did was just like religious stuff. It's funny, Kwaku did that video where he was like, yeah, you know, they are talented, but you know, people are more talented and do better stuff when they're in the church because God blesses them. And I was like, look at anything we did. Yeah. Look at the volume of our work now versus then, and it's like
we're
not even comparable.
We're not saying it's good at any point, but you have to agree. If you go back in time, it's not better. Yeah. Psychedelics are such a big topic that we could seriously talk about for hours. We should probably do a video on it this week. We've been meaning to do like a video on our channel, just going into depth, because we never really have, only on our Patreon.
We should do another video on psychedelics together. I would love to bring you back and do another one. I'm incorporating psychedelics more into my channel. I actually just interviewed someone who does psychedelic therapy, and she brought the clinical approach, and it was really enlightening. So I'm excited to drop that episode as well. But yeah, cool. Psychedelics, they will just open up your heart, mind, soul, physical, mental, spiritual, everything world, and just show you what life's all about, which is amazing.
Yeah. I think you kind of mentioned this, but it feels like so much of Mormonism is trying to transcend the human condition and looking on the world with disdain, and being, you know, or the idea that people would find their spirituality in nature or something is looked down upon as, you know, a lesser version of spirituality. But I feel like kind of spirituality to me now is about embodiment, and it's so easy to sort of, you know, take that approach of trying to transcend the human condition, even though you obviously can't, and then to look down on everything beneath you. But it's taking you out of the human experience so much that you don't even know what you're comparing like yourself to. You think you know, but it's like life can be so rich, and like our connection to the natural world can be so rich, and just so many things. I mean, and part of it is also just growing up. I think you realize this too, but there's so much richness to be found in life. And if you just live your entire life through mental constructs, and through, you know, superiority complexes, and through conditioned responses, and through adhering to the things you've always been taught are the one way, instead of doing any like significant unlearning, then you're never even getting the full human experience, because so much of your life is geared towards almost trying to lift you out of it. But then you're never really getting anywhere worth being, except for just in a high control group, if it's Mormonism, you know?
For someone hawking real estate in the sky.
Yeah, you're just enriching an organization that is already a multi-billion-dollar organization doing a lot of bad in the world. For what?
Yes. Amen. That was so well said.
The illusion of safety and this pseudo form of healing that just it's not healing. It really feels like smoking, where they sell you the problem and they sell you the solution, and like
exactly.
You don't crave nicotine if you've never had nicotine. And sorry if I'm offending any smokers out there. I love and respect all smokers, but yeah.
No, I love that. And with all of that passion and feistiness and just gusto, let's get into our Linda Listen moment. So something sassy that you want to say to anyone who's pissed you off, or an inspirational bit of advice for our listeners.
This is just, I don't know how inspirational this is, but the only thing that comes to my mind that just time and time again is shown to me as the most important thing you can do to improve your life is do not neglect stillness. Do not neglect making time to just be completely still, completely bored, no inputs. You know, whether that's formal meditation or not, it doesn't have to be, but don't underestimate the power of staring at a painting for 3 hours, or just stuff that, allows you to see more deeply, because I feel like in our society, we're used to constant overstimulation. And so we're so quick to categorize things because we're always on to the next thing. And we miss so much of, for example, like the beauty and richness of nature, because we're like spending our life glancing rather than ever looking deeply. And I just really feel like the best thing most of us can do is make sure we prioritize time to just be completely still. And I know that's not very sexy, Linda Listens, but that's what I have to do.
It's
Linda,
great.
listen, honey, you gotta be still.
Yes. Tanner, do you have one?
Oh, can I just say amen to that one? I think that's great.
Linda, listen what she said. Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time, you guys. You've been amazing. How can people find you and support you? What are you up to? List all your handles.
YouTube, Zelf on the Shelf. That's our main platform. We're also on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. Also, Patreon is a really big thing for us. We do bonus content there, and that's the primary way we support being able to do any of this.
That's a lot of fun over
So
there.
that's our plug for that.
Well, I've loved this conversation. We definitely have to come back and talk about psychedelics because, that is another 3-hour conversation.
Thanks for having us on. It's been so fun.
So if anyone watching or listening wants to support, I also have a Patreon, patreon.com/cults to consciousness. Thank you for your support. It means the world. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well.
Yay, cute.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, it would mean a lot if you could like and subscribe on YouTube and leave a review or a comment to help with our visibility. You can also find me on social media at Cults to Consciousness or reach out by email at cults2consciousness@gmail.com.